Hello, I just wanted to draw attention to something that crops up in Bran Collingwood's work on the elements and the elemental archetypes in natural psychology. Please do have a look at the playlists on elements and archetypes. That will give you some background to this if you're unfamiliar with the subject. But anyway, assuming you know something about this and you've seen some of the previous videos or studied it yourself, uh, what we kind of like work on is the basis that psychological archetypes, some of the very powerful psychological archetypes that do tend to shape our lives, and that we can draw upon for various things, they are characterized elementally by a combination of two elements, with one being more dominant than the other. So, for instance, you can have fire and air, or air and fire. You can have water and fire, fire and water, air and earth, or earth and air, that sort of thing. Yeah. So you get these different archetypes, which can be very powerful in people's lives, and someone called Tamar de Jong, with his co-workers in the 1960s, correlated 12 archetypes with 12 combinations in this way. It's a really interesting, system, and I will just show you what the circle looks like, so you can just have that reference. This is just a very rough drawing up of this circle of archetypes. So you can see there's 12 archetypes with their various names, and they have these combinations of elements shown. Okay. Now, originally with Temo, he very much thought that people were specific types, and that really was your type, and you work from that. And I think there's quite a bit of validity in that. I think there's quite a bit of validity in that, though. You shouldn't get limited by these things, so you shouldn't identify with them. But I think they do tend to be starting points for people, and people do tend to follow along certain courses in this way. Now, what I wanted to look at though here, I mean, accepting that maybe the type that a person isn't quite as fixed as Tamo thought, but that people do have distinct natures, and these natures can be looked upon through this lens of elemental attributes, of air, fire, earth, and water. And so this is a really interesting idea here. But the thing is, people go through development with these things. They go through a kind of development with these things. Tama thought that you, for instance, started off with one archetype dominant during childhood, and then when you transferred to adulthood, another archetype became more dominant. Its spell became more dominant over your life, of what was emerging in you, and that these two archetypes together would contain all of the elements between them. Yeah. So if you had earth and fire as your childhood archetype, you would have some sort of combination of water and air, or air and water, yeah, as your adult one. That was his idea on it. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Yeah, to see how that might work out. And they did a lot of work, he and the Green Monks that he was working with in North London, on looking at different people and trying to characterize these different combinations. But in any case, a person goes through a series of developments and a process which should be leading towards some kind of individuation. Yeah. Now, the way Bran sees it is that we go through specific phases and specific developments which tend to be guided by certain of the archetypes to prepare us, and to prepare us usually characteristically as boys and girls, men and women, or what have you. Yeah, and that was how he saw things. And one of the things that was very interesting is that Brad comes up with this sense that you need to be, in a sense, grounded in either the masculine elements or the feminine elements first. And then later, when you're grounded in the elements that you need, either masculine or feminine, yeah, so that's either air and fire in the case of masculine, and water and earth in the case of feminine. Once you're grounded in the elements that you need first off, according to your nature, then later on you can go on to develop the others. And so you can gain completion or greater completion in that way. But you do need to actually have the right sequence. And personally, I'd say that I think that fits from experience. Now, Bran linked it very much to basically whether you were male or female. So males have the masculine ones first, females have the feminine ones first. So that would mean that males tend to need to establish air and fire, which Bran was characterizing as mind and spirit, yeah, first, and girls need to establish themselves in earth and water, which is like body and feeling, that needs to be established first. Now, we know at the very least that there are exceptions to this pattern. I think there's probably more than exceptions, if you see what I mean. But in any case, I think the principle holds that you need to do one and then the other, because you can't really do both at the same time. You can't develop both at the same time, or become, in a sense, initiated into both at the same time. And so, whether it links to your physical gender or not, you do need to follow one route or the other. I think that's how it generally seems to work. Yeah, that makes sense to me. It makes sense looking back on my own life, even though I don't follow the typical masculine pattern. I would say that I far more followed the feminine pattern, which is why, really, in a sense, I didn't start properly living until middle age in some respects, because the support and the support, the encouragement, and the opportunities just weren't there. It's very true that society has a thing of providing women with far more opportunity for the earth and water stuff, and they provide men in general with more opportunity for the air and fire stuff. Now, though I think that's in some societies that is shifting, it is altering, and hopefully in more enlightened societies, whether they are old-fashioned or not, there is a responsiveness to individuals from people at large. Yeah, it's a very interesting subject, But the thing is that I do think that it holds true. This principle holds true, that you either go along the masculine axis or the feminine axis. It's one or other really suits your nature. And it's not that is all of your nature. It's just that you sort of gravitate towards one or other axis. And if we look at the diagram, we'll see that these are actually the cardinal axes. Like, for instance, look, magician, air, fire. Magician, air, fire. Jester, fire, air. This is the masculine axis. So some people will be almost like kind of like gravitating or revolving or in orbit around this axis, and their development hits this one first. It needs this one first. They need to be established in this first, in order to have a good development. Other people are quite the other way around. They need this axis, and you see here, Enchantress, water, earth. Mother Nature, earth, water. This is the feminine axis of water and earth. And some people, they gravitate towards this. Their nature gravitates towards this, yeah. And this is what they need to develop first, yeah. And so, but that doesn't mean, for instance, that all people who are gravitating towards this axis are in fact dominated by these archetypes, or the masculine ones dominated by these archetypes. people are combinations of all sorts of archetypes in all sorts of different ways, and combinations of elemental attributes in all sorts of different ways. But there is something about an essential developmental route which the person takes. And I think it tends to fall into one or other of these directions, yeah? And I think in that sense, what Bran is saying is actually, I think he's really hit on something there. I think it's an important point to bear in mind, you know. And maybe also it's a point to actually reflect on it in yourself. How was it for you? How was it for you? Do you fit the you know the norms of your society in terms of the development that you tend to be offered? Does it actually fit your nature, or does your nature lead you in other ways? Yeah, because it's your authentic nature and your authentic line of development, which is what's important, not what society says. You know, the elements in society, the elements in nature, do not care about what society says, yeah, or expects. And like when I look back at my life, I can see that as a boy growing up at the time that I was, it was not easy to find a sense of recognition and foundation in the feminine elements, yeah. But those were what my nature was really about, yeah, in a primary sense, yeah. So of course I went off on all sorts of things, trying to find my way through what I could in life through magic, art, different things, yeah. But ultimately, it wasn't until I found my foundation in those elements that my life could actually go any further, and that took until really my 40s, essentially, until I was able to find that foundation, because society does not give you that opportunity in general as a male. And you know, for women, they may find the opposite, that they are really meant for those that masculine axis of development, but society, in one way or another, sort of denies it to them, and so that it causes people all sorts of problems, crises, workarounds, some of which are creative, some of which are are quite destructive, yeah. But I think that's sort of part of what can happen there. So I think it's a good thing to think about. Think about, what was your line of development? Did you relate first? Did you need to gain your value in your sense of your body and your physicality and your feelings and emotions first? Or were you somebody who needed to have an affirmation of your spirit and your energy and your mind? Yeah, was that what you needed first? Because ultimately, once your nature is honored, then your nature can grow and start to assimilate and relate to what appears to not be it. Though in fact it's more a question that it's a matter of sequence and order, really, and which is your underlying pattern, in a sense, I think, yeah. So anyway, I hope that's of interest. Sorry, the illustrations are all quite rudimentary because I don't have access to my proper computer at the moment. So I'm doing this all on a phone, which is why this is quite a basic video in some senses. But I hope that's interesting, and feel free to comment if you like. Bye bye. Now, just a little postscript to that, in case some things weren't clearly expressed, and also just to add a few things. I hope it's clear that no person actually is any of the archetypes, and no person is simply made up of archetypes. Yeah, these are, I mean, as far as we can tell, these are energies, using that term in its colloquial sense rather than any kind of scientific one. These are energies. These are things that we can feel and that we express, and that seem to describe characteristically forms of functioning, and like how we kind of are, really, and how we relate and develop and grow, and how we see things, and the sort of world we find ourselves living in terms of our perceptions, uh, they tend to be coloured by these forces. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we're made up of these forces in that sense. I don't think that's quite so, really. Um, so I have to make that clear. People aren't archetypes, and also they are not simply made up of archetypes either, and that has to be. I think that needs to be said, really. And the other thing is that if you believe in things like, for instance, the soul, yeah, or this sort of thing, this sense of something to us, which is beyond the body and beyond what we think of as life and death, in a sense. Such a thing is not shown on this circle anywhere. Yeah. If we see this is a circle of archetypes. It's a psychological pattern. Yeah, and it shows it in terms of these energies. Yeah. We could look at the Enchantress, for instance, and we might link this to soulfulness. Yeah, the things that we think of as being soulful, but the actual soul is not shown anywhere on this wheel. Okay. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear. From my perspective, that's how I see things and how I can understand things. Yeah. So you're not made up of archetypes, and the soul is beyond this study. And I think it's important to have that personally as a kind of, almost as a preface to the work, because it's important for there to be a place for that mystery, basically, and that mystery, which is so intimately connected with people, has to be allowed to be.